in terms of headlines for development, a couple of things I'd like to draw your attention to are the expanded training offer that we have already started to roll out, which is very focused around building capacity in schools to support inclusion. So two key things there. One of them is the Nurture project. We have created some funding within our grants to have 4 rollouts of Nurture training for schools, and that will give 20 schools across our county the accreditation in order to be able to open their own Nurture group in their own school. This is a rolling programme, so the date for the first Nurture groups to open should be September 2023. That's been really well received so far. We've been oversubscribed, which is great. So we've had to buy some more places. Always good to see schools coming on board with those kinds of projects. And that won't just support, of course, children who are looked after. It will also support across those other 2 families of children previously looked after and children with a social worker, but also wider. You know, for vulnerable children identified by the Boxall profile as needing that kind of intervention. So like I said earlier, we're very much about working in schools with partnership. They are asking for things like that, and we are aiming to support them with it so that they can move forwards too. I'm very, very proud to say that the team, through blood, sweat and tears, prevented at least 10 permanent exclusions up to the date of this report being written. There's probably more than that, to be honest, but we're really down. It's quite subjective how you define that. So it was the 10 that were very down to the wire. And like I said, that is blood, sweat and tears, working with schools and our partners across Shropshire to make sure that those children get the deal that they need in order to be successful. One of the key developments for us this year is the Pep Journey. And actually what I'll do is I'll just move on to that for a second. Back when I started in the autumn term, one of the things that I identified was that there were 58% of PEPs as good quality. Now my drive is for every single young person in care to have a good quality PEP. That's what they deserve and that's what they need. So moving on from a 58% was a really key thing for me. An audit in November showed us exactly where we were at and what needed to change. So the team were incredibly hardworking and they achieved 80% of good quality PEPs at the end of the spring term. So we're on our way. It's a work in progress, but we are on our way. There are no year -2 PEPs. And when I say year -2, what I mean by that is the 3 to 4 year olds. So, you know, the sort of 2 to 3 and 3 to 4 year olds coming into school. There aren't PEPs for that year group at the moment, and that is also part of our work in progress. Post-16 PEPs were EAT plans, and so that was a drive for us to get that in place, and they are now in place and working really well. We've also had to adapt the PEP quite quickly to make sure that, for example, the new early years foundation stage attainment section was reflecting the new framework. So we had to act quickly on that. That's all in place. And one of the things that I'm really pleased about is our new young people's questions. Previously, there were about 50 questions for our children to answer as part of their PEPs. Which was, you know, a very great number for them, bless them, more like an interview than, you know, part of their plan. And so we now have very child-centred minimum number of questions, and they are very focused around me and I, rather than what do you like to do. So the language has changed, and it has encouraged our children to participate more. And one of my favourite quotes for this year is a little chap in year 4 called Harry, who recently won the writing competition in West Midlands. So well done, Harry, for that. But he put in his PEP as part of one of his questions, I believe People should have as many dreams as they want, and that's what I want to see for all of our children, to feel that they can have their dreams and we will be there to support them on their way. So in terms of that Pep journey, we are rebuilding, sound like Bionic Man now, we are rebuilding the Pep so it is streamlined for schools, because we're very mindful about head teachers' well-being, designated teachers' workload, etc. So we are streamlining the Pep, taking the best parts of it and making it much more user-friendly, much more fit for purpose across a number of areas. And then we're currently just working with social care to make sure that the processes and roles and responsibilities are also nice and watertight. Everyone understands what they should be doing. So my last thing on there, which if you saw the presentation, says capacity exclamation mark. That's about, you know, moving forwards next academic year, because we need to make sure all our children have a PEP, which is about that year -2 group, making sure that we start to include those next year. So that's one of the key recommendations that I'm looking for support with. In terms of outcomes for Shropshire children last summer, I said I would give them kind of a moment to just celebrate those with you, because in GCSE terms, our children achieved higher than other looked after children nationally for the 9 to 5 English and Maths indicator. So that's if they got an English and a Maths grade at grade 5 or above. So that's really amazing for our children. And at the end of Key Stage 2, we also, our children in Year 6, also achieved well above the national indicator for other looked after children. And they progressed better than other children in care nationally. There are some areas around attainment and progress that we need to work on. And that is specifically things, for example, like progress of our children looked after who have an EHCP. That's one of our target areas for development. And back in the autumn, we identified that with the phonics, tests that the children take, only half of ours achieved the standard. But we put some targeted work in for the group who are going to take the test in the autumn that we just had, and they got 64% of working at the standard. So really proud of those children. The COVID context has also meant that we've identified, in particular, Year 1s have been particularly negatively affected by COVID in terms of where they're at now and what we need to do to support them to ensure they get the best chances. And speech and language is one of the key areas. You've probably heard it nationally, and it's, you know, a key area that we're looking at, developing training and also a personalised offer for our children. So we're not making them wait. We want what a good parent would want for them, which is access to services. In terms of the extended duties, they started on the 1st of September 2021 in response to the Children in Need review, and that identified how the outcomes for children with a social worker were actually worse than for those for children in care. So that's one of the reasons that virtual school heads have been given that strategic responsibility. And it's for the ages from 0 to 18 in all settings. We quickly put an action plan in place once I started, mostly focused on recruitment, like I showed you, and we got an assistant head and an education advice and support officer. They're now in post, so that was one of the key things that we achieved. And our assistant head has made sure that there have been awareness raising and consultation sessions across schools and social care, so that people are aware of what the new duties are and what they aren't. Our nurture rollout is supporting the strategic development of outcomes for that group of children. And I forgot to mention earlier also the second training initiative, which is the emotion coaching. And that has been rolled out already to foster carers and it will be rolled out to schools in September. And that motion coaching, if you're unfamiliar with it, it's basically a way of supporting children to grow resilience through the way that we respond to them when they're experience dysregulation, for example, and the language we use around that. And if we're using a common language at home and in school, all the better. Data is a work in progress for this particular work stream, because it's about getting systems to talk to each other, but I'm determined that that will happen. And we have a meeting later this month with Insight to try and achieve a data pool that crosses over with Synergy and with our LCS social care dashboard. So we will get there on that, I'm determined. I was really pleased to see the work of our post-16 department recognised in the Ofsted report about how our older children are helped and supported into higher education training and employment opportunities. And that's a real success, because that's despite one person being in that department, as well as just over half of our post-16 children living outside Shropshire. So, you know, sometimes it's travel, but it's about hard to reach and overcoming the barriers of kind of reaching young people when they're living far away. So in terms of post-16, we've done lots of changes this academic year so far. We have developed new tracking systems, a new post-16 PEP. We've made sure that our key post-16 providers had attachment training. We've created new welcome packs for unaccompanied asylum seeking young people, and we've created new links with universities too, to give them that aspiration. So the 3 key recommendations out of the report, just to draw your attention to, is, you know, looking towards future-proofing the Shropshire Virtual School, making sure that we build on what we've already achieved this year so far, increasing capacity as part of that, so that we reduce caseloads from 1 to 98, which is what they're at now, and supporting that Pep journey so that every single one of our children has a good quality Pep or personal education plan. Thank you very much.
Wow. Yeah. Well done. I have one question just to ask. How are the Ukrainian children settling in?
So at the moment, Peggy, none of the Ukrainian children have come here unaccompanied. They've all come with families. So I'm working obviously closely as part of education senior leadership team to be part of that conversation and planning. Right. But none of them are specifically looked after children or previously looked after at the moment, or have a social worker at the moment. I think it's likely that that could change. And I know we've been doing a lot of work to prepare for those children generally.
Yeah, apologies, I've only been on the committee a year. So I'm just interested in how you actually started off the virtual school, because obviously it's a fairly recent thing. Was it because of COVID or whatever? It's obviously working really well and it's going to continue, but how did it all start? I think that's because it's not in any of the reports. Thank you.
That's okay, Claire. So virtual schools pilot was back in 2010-11, and then it became part of the statutory requirements across nationally for every local authority to have a virtual school head teacher. I think it was around 2014. So Shropshire has then had a virtual school for that time, but I took over from the previous post holder on the 1st of September, and that's when also the new duties came in.
Right.
Does that help?
Yes. So basically, it's grown quite rapidly in the last few years.
That's correct.
Yeah, and that didn't come through, and I didn't know that. So apologies. Thank you.
Okay.
Ruth.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for a really interesting presentation. That was very interesting. I've got a couple of questions on section 4.7, participation and young people's voice, which is really positive and really, exciting stuff. How are people, or how are young people who are living outside of Shropshire engaged with that? Is that a challenge, or is support provided so that they can, take part? And what sort of numbers? Because I noticed it says 8 young people attended the music workshop, but 8 out of 400 and 500 something young people is quite low. And then my other questions around point 5.2 and post-16 education, and it refers to a staffing ratio of 1 to 121 young people. How does that compare nationally with other local authorities, please?
Thank you, Ruth. Okay, so in terms of participation, it's a really good point about how our young people access that participation offer when they're spread far and wide. So, for example, some of that band build that you mentioned, which we did again at the Easter break, it's for a very small number of children and it does rely on them coming into Shrewsbury. Okay, so that's one example. But other examples are for the West Midlands, across the West Midlands, Children in Care, we created, not just me, but the virtual school heads together, created a World Book Day writing competition. So there are, what we're trying to achieve is a variety of participation activities, some which obviously are geographically requiring children to live locally, but others where it is inclusive of that. Does that help?
Yes, and that's really encouraging because I think it's important. The school holidays are particularly long if people are isolated, and obviously should have the same opportunities as other young people. So thank you for that.
Okay, and then in terms of the post-16 question that you asked, you mentioned the ratio of 1 member of staff to 121 young people.
Yes.
Can you remind me of the question? Did you say it was how in line is that with other virtual schools nationally?
Yes, or within the region. I mean, it seems a high number, but if that's the norm, or want a better description, then perhaps that's fine. But is there room for improvement?
Thank you. So the difficulty with post-16 across national virtual schools is that there is no pupil premium plus grant. And our virtual school is heavily reliant on pupil premium plus to fund some of our other staffing. So that isn't available as an option for supporting our post-16 department at present. The DfE is running a pilot around PP plus for post-16, and we're hopeful and positive that that might make a difference, maybe even as soon as this new academic year. And that will give more options around how we are able to look at supporting that group of young people. In terms of ratios nationally, I can't give you that figure for just post-16 on its own, but I can give the figure to you nationally for the ratios of staff working directly with young people in virtual schools is roughly 1 to 55 to 60, according to the NAVISH survey of 2020. NAVISH is the National Association of Virtual School Heads, and they've just done another survey and we're waiting for the results on that. Our current ratios at the virtual school in Shropshire are 1 to 98.
Yes, I mean, there's a bit of a disparity, isn't there, between 1 to 98 and 1 to 50 or 60. So maybe there's something that can work done.
Come in there, morning all, Tanya Miles, Director of Our People. As Jo has said in her report, we are reviewing currently the capacity in the virtual school. As you've heard this morning, much progress in the virtual school and getting it really recognised in the council and beyond the council in terms of the great work that the virtual school is doing and what it needs to do to support our young people in school and in education. But we do recognise that there is, as our looked at have increased over the last couple of years, the virtual school hasn't increased, and so we've asked Jo to do a deep dive review over the next few months and send a report to me late summer to myself and David Shaw, AD for Education. Thanks, Jo.
Okay. Kevin Pardy.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. I looked at it to begin with and it frightened me a little bit, but once you start reading, you can't get away from. So I'm pleased that it's a warts and all. That's refreshing. And I'm also pleased with the great progress that's being made. And I'm pleased to hear that you've had targeted recruitment, and that's been very positive. My question is just a simple question. And we have 569 young people in our care at the moment. And then you go on to mention a number of young people, hang on a minute, asylum children. Sorry, you have a number of asylum children. Is that within the 569?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So what promises with these asylum seekers and maybe eventually the Ukrainian children coming into the county, what promises have you had of financial help from national government or local government?
So thank you for your question. So sorry, it's a bit difficult to keep eye contact with you from here. Just turn that a little bit. So in terms of national funding for unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people, the government ensures that local authorities have funding for those that on the National Transfer Scheme, and also in terms of virtual school specific funding. Each one of those young people is eligible for Pupil Premium Plus. So it's important that as head teacher, I ensure that it's spent wisely to support them successfully integrating and engaging in education and learning English well. And we have examples of young people who've gone on to be employed in the care leavers team, for example, which I can't take credit for because that's previous to my time. But also we have young people at the moment applying to university, for example. So it's how we use that money wisely.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, I saw the mic. Any more questions?
Are we just noting this report or moving the recommendation?
We have some recommendations.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to move them.
Okay, would like to second them?
I'll second it.
Councillor Turley to second them. All in favour? Thank you. And thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
That's an excellent presentation. I met Joe previously and I have to admit she really gave me some confidence in how we're carrying on. But it's good to hear it today. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Chair, can I ask, I take it with the, looking into sort of funding and extra teachers and things like that within this parameter, are we having this at a later meeting back at the end of this year to sort of follow up where we're going with this, please?
I'd like to have some update, yeah. When you've done your deep dive and we have more, more information. Point in the word. Yes, Kevin, I'll be looking for it to come back. I think Daniel's making a note. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
If it's okay, whilst colleagues are just swapping around, just for everyone's benefit, I'm David Shaw, I'm Assistant Director of Education and Achievement at the Church Council. I just wanted to clarify some numbers. We were asked previously the numbers of Ukrainian children in Shropshire currently. So we currently have 50 within Shropshire and in the system. So we have 4 preschool, 26 in the primary sector and 20 in secondary system. And we are working daily and weekly to review that. So whilst that is current and correct today, by tomorrow it is likely to be out of date. So, I would obviously provide that clarity to colleagues. Equally, in terms of the question regarding funding, yes, there is funding both to local authorities and to schools. And what we're trying to is work with schools to ensure that we are and they are spending that resource as effectively as possible, aligned to some of the things that Joe's described around Pupil Premium Plus, Pupil Premium funding comes directly, and the normal sending funding that comes through. So again, we're trying to take a holistic view in terms of being able to support this. So hopefully that helps clarify for colleagues.
That's fine. Yes, thank you. That's sort of answered my question.
Sorry, Peggy, can I come back on that one? Just
Yeah.
a quick question. With the funding and everything else, it's great what they're getting in school and through the virtual school and things like that. But what sort of level of support we're giving the children at home so they've got access to IT and everything they need to sort of follow that academic year through once they've actually left the school programme? Sorry.
So if I can respond to that, so that's a great question. So we've got a range of things that are in place. Obviously, we've got support directly to the children people themselves from the schools. We've got a really, really strong Ukrainian community response that's actually driving the response really, so to make sure we're not assuming anything, but always, reflecting the voice of the family and the young person in terms of what they need. We've literally, over the last few days, said yes to order a range of resources, books specifically, that are translated into Ukrainian, starting from the perspective of understanding attachment and loss, and providing something completely new, starting school, to really support that transition from where they've been, what they've experienced, into this new culture, new school system. We've obviously got some very practical challenges in the sense that the Ukrainian school system is very different. So young people generally finish school in the next couple of weeks and actually won't start back until the autumn term. So again, there's lots of discussions with families in terms of, are they starting school, are they not starting school? So again, we're trying to be receptive to that without forcing. The challenge we have as local authorities, at the minute a child arrives in the UK, they are bound by the law which says children should have to go to school when they're compulsory school age. So we're trying to take a responsive and sensible approach to that in that way. We've also got a range of support through the Ukrainian community in terms of mobile phones and laptops and resources. So in direct response to the question, we're trying to provide a range of support in terms of technology, resources, emotional and mental health and wellbeing support. We've also got our education psychology services that are supporting schools directly and working with them. So again, we're not trying to pursue anything, but we're trying to provide a really wide and varied offer across the piece. So Laura Fisher is coordinating that as our assistant director and our head of housing here, supported by a colleague in our team in education.
Does that answer your question?
I'm just going to say, we've had 3 families in our little village, and I met them all at the fete. And one of the older children was actually doing her studying online, so she was still, connected to the school in Ukraine. There was loads of support. Generally everyone is, helping, and they seem very happy. Their English was excellent actually, and they've all got places that they're in school and they're quite happy. And I, they obviously got my number, and they seem very happy. And any issues, they said they'd give me a call. So I think, they're getting loads of support from the community as well, and that's really, really helpful.
Yeah, it's so hard for them.
Yeah.
Ruth?
I'd just like to pay credit to our schools because they have been superb actually in offering support. The concern for me is the very long wait for benefits and the impact that may have on those families. Arrivals at least on Easter Monday are unlikely to receive any income from universal credit until 10th of June, which seems a rather long time. So it is they've had their for welcome grant. It is the host families and local communities that are providing a huge amount of support. And I do think that could be a concern if people have to wait even longer because of incorrect paperwork.
Any comments?
It's a challenge, and one that we are making a decision to set government about it with. You're absolutely right. There's a fantastic hub, as you know, and providing daily support to all the Ukrainian families. But the council has said to government that it's really important to progress those applications really, really quickly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, David, for that reassurance. Right. We're now going to look at the send written statement of action, and I'm pleased to ask Karen Lavelle. Have I said it right?
Yes, you have. Yeah.
To present. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Karen Lavelle. I'm the new service manager for Send and Inclusion, and I'm here today with David Shaw, Assistant Director for Education, to talk to you about the Send written statement of action. So I've prepared a report. I don't plan to read the report, but I will just go through the highlights for you. Okay. So you will recall that back in January 2020, Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission carried out a joint local area inspection of SEND, of special educational needs. The focus on that was around identifying children and young people with special educational needs and or disabilities, meeting the needs of children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities, and improving outcomes for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. So the inspection was looking at how effectively the local area delivers on all three of those areas. So following that inspection, you will recall that there were some concerns raised about it from the effectiveness of the local area. And these concerns were highlighted as there was an inconsistent strategic leadership and weak strategic planning across the local area, notably the clinical commissioning group, and ineffective use of data. There was a lack of inclusion of health services input to the local area sending action plan. Significant waiting times for the large numbers of children and young people on the autism spectrum disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder diagnostic pathways. Significant waiting times for those waiting for speech and language therapy assessments and treatment. There was inconsistency in the quality of input from education and health and care into education, health and care plans, and a high rate of exclusions for children and young people with education, health and care plans, and a high rate of repeat fixed term exclusions for those receiving SEND support. So the actual inspection report, to remind you, is attached as Appendix 1.
So, sorry, Chair, can I just ask a quick question? It's two questions really, but no. So I just wanted to know why the CCG isn't here really, because I think, you know, it's pointless without them. And also, who's in this quality, whatever it's called, quality assurance group? I mean, presumably that's a mixture of the CCG and the council.
Yes.
So they've fallen down twice already. In my opinion, because quite clearly there's some things that need addressing, and you know, whilst we can, you know, go through everything without actually somebody from the CCG here listening to what we're saying, you know, because we've sent things before, I think, to the Health Overview Scrutiny Committee, but it is very frustrating, I think, for us when there are issues and there's no engagement, and especially moving forward, because I think we've got to do some work together in the future. So I'd have thought it was about time that actually they started coming to things and participating. But that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Chair, if I can respond to that. Okay, so,
Yeah.
so I think that's a fair question and fair challenge to pose. I think you'll absolutely hear who's in the quality assurance group in a second, and I'll let Karen respond to that. And I think moving forward, what we are very keen to do is have exactly that connected ability. So whether it's this group or whether it's a different opportunity, I think that combined presentation will be really, really important. What we can see, and I know Karen will allude to this more in the report in a moment, is we have seen some recent connection in terms of that work. So we are having those conversations. We've got those people around the table now in terms of that movement. What we need to see is we need to see change, we need to see action from that. I think that's the challenge, being really clear. So we've got engagement, we've got colleagues working with us now at all the different levels. So it's now moving that into operational action and impact that families and people can feel on the ground.
Okay, thank you.
So you of course remember that this committee considered the written statement of action and endorsed that back in September 2020. What I'd like to do is just outline some of the work that's been done in relation to the 6 priority areas. So the first one, the inconsistent leadership and weak strategic planning. So the partnership has reorganised itself into a new governance structure, which you were just asking about. And so the governance structure consists of colleagues from CCG, from education, from health and care. There is a designated clinical officer who has been appointed, and also a designated social care officer. And there is a programme manager from the CCG. And we all work together on the sort of the partnership board, but also the quality assurance group that now kind of oversees the work of the work streams and then feeds that progress back up to the partnership board. So there's been some key appointments, myself included, and also David, who is here today. And work has been undertaken in the production of a SEND strategy that was published in April 2021. And also there's been the production of a joint strategic needs assessment. Okay, so the health services input to the SEND action plan. The Joint Commissioner that I've mentioned has created a market position statement to understand the provision available to the children and young people across Shropshire. And the CCG involvement in producing the written statement of action has resulted in greater health involvement in all of the work streams. As we were saying, there's a lot of presence in the work streams from health colleagues. We now need to move on to that next phase. The waiting times for the children and young people with ASD and ADHD, I think it'd be fair to say that those waiting times are still high. Significant work has been undertaken to put an early intervention model in place, based on a model that was developed first and foremost by Coventry, that is looking to put some screening and some interventions in place for those children whilst they are either on the waiting list or prior to joining the waiting list. A work stream has also been established for the speech and language therapy service and the children on the waiting list. So there's been an advice line, a handbook, and also we've rolled out a programme called Talk Boost, both early years Key Stage 1 and we're due to roll out Key Stage 2. And again, that's looking at early intervention for those children and young people, the aim of which would be to reduce the number of children needing to go onto the waiting list, although the waiting list itself remains high. So myself, the designated clinical officer and the designated social care officer are working together on a quality assurance framework, which has been introduced to improve the quality and consistency of education, health and care plans. Every new education, health and care plan that is published now goes through a monitoring process, and feedback is given to both the plan writers and the people who give advice to the plans. So there's a continuous loop of feedback. There's developments taking forward for training for staff who will give advice to the EHC needs assessment process. And I'm pleased to say that the 20-week performance remains above the national averages in terms of producing the education, health and care plans. There have been some challenges around the annual reviews. The work stream itself has not yet looked at the annual review process and the quality of the annual reviews, but there is every intention to do that, and that's the next phase of work. So the area of the exclusions. So a draft inclusion policy has been presented to the school central policy group. That was on the 10th of June last year. And a task force is in approach so that professionals can respond quickly to support children and young people with hands-on support, and the behaviour panel has been set up. And this has raised a solution-focused approach which is applied to various situations. And as Jo has said in her previous presentation, a lot of work has been done around preventing exclusions. The statistics around exclusions obviously show the number of exclusions, but what they don't represent is the number of exclusions that have been averted. And there's been a lot of work happening across the local area in terms of preventing those exclusions, both permanent and fixed term.
Sorry, thank you. Just a quick one coming back in on that. With exclusions and everything else, I come across something in the school the other day. Is it Purple Leaf? Am I right thinking that as a referral mechanism? Is that being used a lot more? Is that sort of helping with exclusions at all, please?
I can see Jo nodding, so I think it might just come down to Jo just to share, but I think, yes, it's an example. Jo, you want to something like that?
Yes, certainly. Purple Leaf was a partner organisation that presented at our recent designated teacher network, so that offer is out to schools. As far as I understand it, it's a free offer. It's not just about children with EHCP, but it's, I think, in connection with abusive experiences and how they can support schools with training and also direct work with the children.
Whilst I'm on green, not red. Oh, here you go. So whilst we're on questions, sorry, I'll just do this while you're going through. Paragraph 4.4, who's paying for the two higher leaving teacher assistants?
So the HLTAs,
Yeah.
yes. One post funded by Health, the other's funded by the local authority.
Right, oh, good. So, yeah, okay. Thank you. I'll leave my other questions for the end.
Did you want one to come in now?
Wait till the end.
Okay. Keen mind after all.
So just in summary really then, just to say that the Partnership Board and the Quality Assurance Group, we are subject to regular meetings from the Department for Education and NHS England, who monitor the progress of the work that we're undertaking. So I've attached the latest monitoring report for you within the papers. The service, the area, as you are very much aware, will be subject to a re-inspection shortly, imminently. We do not have a date for that as yet, but we are expecting the call any time. And I think it'd be fair to say that you can see from the report that much action has been taken, a lot of work has been done, but there is still a fair way to go. And we still have a lot of work to do to address these concerns across the local area. So what we've done is we've started to put together what's called an accelerated action plan. So that's been led by myself, the designated clinical officer and the designated social care officer in conjunction with our parent carer forum. And obviously what that will also include is feedback in terms of how our families are experiencing the impact of the work that we've done in terms of the local area, and obviously their views will be very much driving forward what our next steps are and what we need to do.
Thank you, Karen. Chair, if I might just come in before any other questions. No, it's just to say, well, thank you very much, Karen, for that overview. It's important to be mindful that Karen's been in post for about 9 weeks now. So we're taking stock in terms of where things are, and the self-evaluation that's been produced is helping us to do exactly that, and therefore ensure that the work that's included in the action plan is absolutely robust. It's the right actions to be taken to drive progress forward. The other point I think it's important to make is you've heard today a number of areas, emotion coaching as one example, that actually play through all of these different aspects, whether children have special educational needs, whether they're former care, people that have been subject to care, or children that are looked after now. And actually what we're seeing as recurring themes, the ability of school to be inclusive and just really engage and understand what those challenges may be, particularly given the context of the 2 years that we've all experienced during the pandemic. So I think it's fair to say that we're on that journey now, and it's just important just to reflect really some of the data. We've seen over half our schools have had a decrease in the number of permanent exclusions. I'm not going to get into the details of SEND or non-SEND, but I think the point that I'm making there is we've got many schools that are on board with this, absolutely, but we've got inconsistency. And the next phase of activity that we're going to engage in is very much trying to bring that inconsistency into some consistency, and actually how we really focus on the provision. So we've got mainstream one side, you've got special provision the other side, and you should have a real range of opportunities all the way in between that allows for those various different needs, challenges, stretch opportunities that child needs, depending on where they are and their needs. So that's the piece of work that we, again, alongside this, are aligning this work to. You've also got preparation for adulthood, which is essentially enabling young people with special needs to live the best life. And anyone who's had a look at the SEND strategy, that's what young people describe. They want their dream life. They want to be independent. They want to be able to engage in society. They want to have employment or supported opportunities to do that. So the point that we're trying to make is all this work needs to come together. So the action plan that Karen's outlined there will include more than just these areas for the written statement of action, and rightly so. It has to include those aspirations that are included within our SEND strategy, and really feed in the young people's voice and the parents' voice as well. And I think it's really powerful that we're doing that. Just as Joe described, actually, the minute you start to engage in a meaningful way, actually, that lived experience is massively powerful and can change the direction of travel for our professionals. So that's the next piece of work that Karen and colleagues are engaging in, which is significant, really. And it's good to have parents on board with that and able to feed into that process. I think it's equally it's important to say that whilst we're presenting to colleagues here and being challenged rightly on the progress that's been made, we will have a programme where we're reporting back to families and parents, because it's no good asking them for their opinion on things unless we don't provide the opportunity to feed back to them. So we've committed as a SEND partnership across the CCGA, Shropshire Council, and wider partners to provide that regular touch point engagement with families. So again, we can have that opportunity. You said we need to do X, Y, and Z. This is where we are, and this is what we've done so far. So what you will see over the next few months is that engagement both ways, and actually we'll be able to provide that evaluation and impact as we move to more of an operational perspective of this. So I just want to provide that wider context. That's helpful.
It's fine. No, it's all right. I was just going to share. When I was governor at a certain school, they were going to exclude this one young man, and I stepped in and said I didn't think it was right. That young man's now at university, and I am so proud of him. I really am. You know, the circumstances he was living with, they weren't quite aware of, and I look at him and just think, yes. Sorry, Bruce.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Karen, for an interesting presentation. Just a few questions, really. I'm really pleased that there's a quality assurance group. I think that's a good step forward. What I'd like to have seen in this report is something around the data, around the diagnostic pathway and the access to speech and language therapy, like how many young people are on the waiting list and how long are they waiting? The two need to go together, and I think the slight friction of it is that it's just not there, and I think the committee would be good to have that in context, really. And my other question is to the chair, actually, whether we could have the outcomes for young people into adulthood transition as an item for scrutiny at some point. Thank you.
Just yeah. Come and answer that.
In terms of the data, and obviously that was picked up, wasn't it, at the inspection in terms of the data, though, we are getting data now on a more regular basis. We are working with our partners to actually analyse that data, so I would hope to be able to bring that back to you.
If I may, Chair, have personal interest, but I've heard this from non-family members, not personal interest, where parents are being told to use their additional allowance for a disabled child to purchase speech and language therapy, and I don't think that's accurate or correct, acceptable.
I can take that feedback.
Okay. I'm going to take it back.
Yeah, I did. Yes, it's nice to meet you, David, behind it. I haven't before. And you're obviously part of this assurance team, and I wish you well. I think there was a couple of other questions, but bear in mind this is just really an update report. I just think that there's obviously hold-ups within the system which you're aware of. I mean, one of the things that's concerned us greatly is the CAMS, and the referrals and assessments and things like that. And if there's anything that we can do as a committee, then I'm sure we'd be happy to assist in any way we can. Because, it is a frustration. We're on the ground and we see these things. And there've been issues there for quite a long time. I wish you well with the new group. I just think that things have got to move quicker than they have been moving, for the sake of these children. So good luck, and if we can help you at all, then please.
Thank you.
I'm certainly, happy to stand up and bang the drum anytime you like. So.
Thank you.
Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. One, how are our SEN hubs working out as they're sort of programming around the county? Are they working? They've been proving very beneficial. And the other question is the EHCP applications, the forms, the paperwork, is that controlled nationally, or is it something we have an overview locally? And can we make them easier for schools in the education area to fill them in, to get these children the support they need quicker, and knowing full well the struggles schools are facing at the moment, and actually having the staff and the manpower to sort of actually deliver these forms? If we can make these forms easier at a local level, is that something we're looking at as well, please?
Speaks the governor, like the rest.
Shall I take the question about the hubs first and foremost?
Yes.
Okay, so the hubs is a piece of work that we're looking at to review the effectiveness of the EHC hubs. As you know, children with education, health and care plans are placed in those hubs. There is a big demand for those places, and the premise that David and I have been working on is that we very much like it that no child is too far away from specialist provision, and that's the specialist provision that they need. So the hubs actually are very much part and parcel of that model that we've been looking at. In terms of the EHC paperwork, I'm sure you're aware that in the hearing paper and in the consultation, there's a suggestion of having a national EHC template and a national approach. That's under consultation at the moment. That consultation closes on the 22nd of July. In terms of our more local paperwork, then obviously we're constantly under review. We don't want to feel that our processes are overly bureaucratic for our schools, because obviously there does need to be a good communication between the schools and the SEND team in terms of requesting, and families for that matter as well, in terms of requesting EHC needs assessments. What we do need to do is ensure that the right children are having the EHC needs assessments, and that the right children are coming through. And that actually where their needs can be met through support, that those needs are identified and met accordingly.
That's great. You know, I'm going to ask next, Peggy, about the hubs and things like that on a future agenda to sort of see how we're going and add these forms and things like that.
Yeah.
Please. Thank you.
Making notes. Kevin Pardy.
Thank you. I wasn't going to say anything. So you mentioned the EHCPs and whether children should be sort of assessed on these things. I've had over the past 8 years I've been a counsellor, quite a few parents, normally mothers, come to me saying they're frustrated because they can't get these assessments because they're being told their children are okay. And I've had a number of children, parents that have asked if they, they're trying to get their children to be diagnosed as far as the spectrum is concerned. And again, these parents are told there's nothing wrong with your child. Yet on 2 occasions there was nothing wrong, but they were not on that spectrum. On 2 occasions, in the end, they found out they were. And we've heard stories before you came here about parents, one parent in particular with twins, waiting until they were 19 before they got a proper assessment. Yet she knew all the way through there was a problem. Why aren't we listening to these parents? Because they're the ones that know. And I know you don't want a great rush of parents going, but they're the ones that know. Why are we not listening to them?
Would you mind if I start that conversation? I think what we're starting to be honest, and I think that's part of what I alluded to in terms of listening. So actually from directly on a strategic level, but also from a needs assessment perspective in terms of families. I think, taking the last 2 years, parents and families have had a lot more time together, and actually things that perhaps may have just been either overlooked or not particularly looked into have come to the fore over the last few years really. So I think that's one aspect. I think the other bit for Shropshire is around, as Karen said already, we want a really strong, clear, consistent identification of the need process, and actually so that the right children are able to receive the right support, and not choose the green paper mantra, but essentially that's the point of it, isn't it really? That wherever you are, wherever you live, you've got equal access to that opportunity. We obviously can't change the past, but it can help us to inform the future. So I think your request, colleagues, in terms of bringing the hub development to a future agenda is absolutely right and proper, and we welcome that, to be honest. That'd be great, because it helps us to share with you our direction of travel around provision. But aligned to that is it's how are we identifying those children and therefore able to meet their needs, and emotion coaching amongst a range of other, emotion-based school avoidance work, just to name 2, are part of that jigsaw puzzle. What we need to ensure that we're doing though is not jumping into certain solutions and having a really sensible, considered approach. So the panel that Karen oversees is a SEND resource panel, and that actually is a multidisciplinary group. So social care, health, education, to actually avoid one person making a single decision about that child's needs. It's really important that that's there, and that robust decision making without undue hurdles along the way is really, really important. So again, part of the work that Karen's doing is to review that process from the minute you request an assessment. It's a 20-week cycle that's laid out really clearly. What happens across that 20 weeks and how can we make that as efficient and effective and easy for families as possible, because this is an emotional journey, isn't it? Very emotional. And as Kelsey rightly described, getting to that stage initially is, we've taken a huge amount of emotion and effort. So we want to understand that, and when we respond, whether that's yes or no, or we want some further information, we need to understand and respond in a human way. So we're not just providing bureaucratic responses, and we're engaging families in that way. That's what we're committing to do.
So it brings us back, I think, to what I said in the very beginning. That it's down to David and Karen working, holding our end up with the CCG and formulating something that works and making sure that their part works as well. That's the key to it all, is making this thing work. And that's the interesting bit. And if we do have an update, we absolutely need somebody off the group from the CCG here sat in the chair next to you, so that we can actually see what progress has been made. Thank you.
Can I just say, we have been concerned about CAMS.
Yeah.
9 years I've been nine years myself sitting on this committee.
I know.
And it keeps getting pulled apart.
I know.
And I don't think it's one that should be pulled apart. I think it's a pincer movement from both of these overviews. Yeah. I think health and ourselves need to be hitting them all the time. Sorry. Soapbox.
Well, we've been on it for long enough, haven't we? Having number 2.
I just wanted to thank David for his words. They're very reassuring. Thank you.
I was going to say, Chair, can we have emails from David? I know we'll have it in our file, but if it could be sent round just to members of the group as points of contact and the responsibilities and things like that, would be very beneficial.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No more questions?
Shall I move we note the report and
Hang on, I think Karen's. No. Oh.
Yep. Is that okay?
I just finalise and say a huge thank you to David and to Karen, who are newbies to Shropshire Council, but I hope people have seen and heard today their absolute commitment and drive in terms of really shifting the culture around SEND inclusion and the virtual school. And we are working in a very different way now. If you go around to our schools, hopefully they'll tell you that as well, in that we're encouraging them to talk to us early doors if they're struggling with a young person, rather than land a fixed term exclusion. And we are progressing. It has been slower than what we would liked, but from the last monitoring visit from both Ofsted and CQC, they could really see the progress that we were making, and much better consistent leadership from the CCG. So I welcome a further report on SEND later on this year. And I think we should also invite the CCG and PAC, which is our parent carers, who work alongside with us in terms of forming the right offer for our SEND community.
Sorry, Chair. I know we're going to try and wrap it up. I have got one question then. Have we got, with our neighbouring councils, do we work closely with our neighbouring councils to use their support framework for SEN? I know with being sort of Shifnal, we're very isolated around the back of sort of Telford sort of thing, and Albrighton, I would say, on the Stafford border, and whether or not we utilise schools and support framework with our local neighbours to help children out, rather than to these children trudging maybe halfway across council to one of their hubs that we might be able to pull from another local authority. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, we've started exactly that discussion, both from a strategic perspective and so Karen's equivalent in Telford in exactly that way. We want, we're not an island. We're part of a bigger, arrangement in terms of making it make sense and work for families and schools. So those conversations are starting in that exact way, and that will be part of our wider place planning for early years, school places and SEND places that we'll be moving towards in the autumn term. So again, that's really important. Thank you.
It's good to hear.
No more questions? Well, can I thank all of you for coming today? It's been nice to meet you all, and now put a face to a name and anything we can do to help. As you can tell, the CAMS has been a sore point with me and those two down there for a very long time, and it'd be good to hear some good news on it. And thank you, Tanya. The work programme is our next item on the agenda.
Chair, just on
Just grab one of these. I can sit down there, yeah.
So thank you.
Hello everyone, Daniel Overview and Scrutiny Officer. No work programme report because there's no work programme at the moment. We have, I'll detail what we plan over in June and July to take us to the position when we do have a work programme. At the beginning of each municipal year, we ordinarily hold a work programming session. And this will take place on the 27th of June. You should have a date in that should be in your diary at the moment. That will be chaired by Claire Wild here, who will be leading on this one because Councillor Note will be on leave that week.
That's absolutely fine, Daniel, but I will be chairing the meeting remotely from a deck chair in Spain. So any view you see at the back is real, not fake.
Fantastic. Yeah, it is online anyway. So let's drop you in on that.
That's right.
But we do have a meeting at the end of June as well, covering two topics. One will be the findings from the recent Ofsted inspection of children's services here in Shropshire. And we will also be looking at the council service as well as discussed earlier. I've just been arranging a meeting with the CCG officers to plan that for you. A good place to start with that might be the transformation plan that the CCG and the council jointly submitted in 2019. I'll share that with the committee after the meeting. It's a public document, and I think that will provide some really useful lines of inquiry for council, which is such a big topic anyway. So it will be a good way to structure that. So we basically have the meeting in June and then a planning meeting in July. Also at the end of June to plan your work programme for the year ahead.
Yes, Councillor Barkley.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I take it that the meeting Claire is showing is on Monday the 27th. And the next meeting of the committee is Wednesday the 29th, not Monday the 29th.
Yeah.
So it's 28th.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. It is a Wednesday, yeah.
My apologies. Sorry, the planning session's on the 28th, the meeting's on the 29th. My apologies. So that's Tuesday the 28th, Wednesday the 29th.
Tuesday the 28th.
Correct. You should have a date in your diary for that. Yeah, brilliant.
I'm not quite sure if that's right, Daniel, or not. Kevin, did you want to?
Just a quick, we normally have a report from the safeguarding chair, from the safeguarding committee and things like that. Have we got that on the horizon line at all, please, Daniel?
Yes, we have. It's one of those ones that it comes when it's ready, and it's never ready on time. And I would be loath to put a date to it because it just won't happen. So it's a beast of a document, and it requires a lot of people to sort of pull things together. So it invariably gets delayed. So when it's ready, they will tell us, and we'll bring it to the committee.
You can tell I'd already asked that question.
28. What time on the 28th?
9 o'clock.
Oh, lovely.
You have to be up early.
Oh, no, it's an hour bit in front, so I'll be right.
That's online. It is. Yeah, all the planning meetings are online.
So the date of the next meeting is Wednesday the 29th of June at 1:30.
Yeah.
Correct.
And you'll be here. Oh, you won't be here.
Sorry, it was a mix-up of dates.
Okay.
That's all, Chair, for me.
That's all. Thank everybody for attending. I hope you've enjoyed the meeting today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Quite
very
refreshing
much.
to hear some action being taken.
Yeah.
We'll watch for the result coming back.
Yeah, very impressed with Sharon and David, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is the meeting
The meeting
closed?
closed.
Yeah.
Both in closed. That's